Jordan Addison, Puka Nacua, and Jaxon Smith-Njigba all had massive performances in Week 14. We'll tell you what year 2 receiver we are buying on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. And on today's show, we're going to talk about some of the biggest winners and losers from Week 14. Kate, let's start with some year 2 receivers and pick which one you want to talk about, because Jordan Addison had another monster performance. Puka Nacua is finally healthy. Jaxon Smith-Njigba continues to post awesome numbers. Of those 3 receivers, which one are you the most interested in buying?
I mean, let's talk about the guy who's probably the least expensive right now. It's Jaxon Smith-Njigba, who a player that, again, we have been very bullish on since coming out in the pre-draft process out of OSU. Just, technically sound, has the size, and finally has the opportunity. We have all but seen Tyler Lockett phased out of this offense entirely, and it has become Jaxon Smith-Njigba's kind of role to move the chains. And right now, heading into Monday Night Football, he's the wide receiver 5 in half PPR scoring formats for good reason, averaging 7.8 targets per game. That kind of opportunity, you don't get that often. 911 receiving yards. That ranks 4th in the NFL heading into Monday Night Football, only behind Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and Jerry Jeudy. What?
Yep.
We could talk about that another show, but the numbers that he is producing are significant. And I think we're finally starting to see the usage that's going to be conducive to an every week fantasy play, and with wide receiver 1 upside that I don't think you yet have to pay wide receiver 1 prices for.
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about this for a while, how we thought Seattle needed to kind of readjust their offense, make Jaxon Smith-Njigba be like the every down receiver, the chain mover, and let Metcalf be the guy that's making the big plays down the field. Now, while their targets were similar this week, that's what we've seen, Kate, over the last month or so, is that the offense is just making JSN a focal point. And one of the things that I've really liked is that they're not just giving him a bunch of targets at or near the line of scrimmage. Like, they're finally starting to push the ball down the field a little bit with him, and he's making plays. So I think this is here to stay. He was one of the most productive receivers in college, even when he was playing with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. Like, he was out producing all of those guys. And again, going into the month of November, being drafted as wide receiver 31, I remember us talking about this when the ADP was released. We thought that was a massive steal. I got to believe when we get our newest batch of ADP, he's going to be closer to the top 20 than top 30.
I have to imagine that. I mean, the safe floor that he has established here in the second half of the season, 69 plus receiving yards each of the last 5 games, 3 touchdowns in that span. I mean, he is producing like a true bona fide wide receiver 1. We've seen improvements pretty much across the board: reception percentage, yards per reception average, yards per route run. Like, we are starting to see that come to fruition. He's mainly playing out of the slot, which we know can be one of these very volume conducive roles. And let's face it, if you're in a full PPR format, that's exactly the kind of usage you want out of Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Get him some of these higher completion percentage throws that can move the chains, get him volume, and see what he does with it. Like, and let DK Metcalf have some of the lower probability targets there along the perimeter, the splash plays, and just let him be a consistent, solid asset on a week-to-week basis.
All right, I want to talk about Jordan Addison because Addison had a fantastic performance against the Falcons. 8 catches, 133 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Kate, over the last month, he is averaging over 100 receiving yards per game. He has scored 5 touchdowns in his last 4 games. You know how much I love Jordan Addison. I know how much Kenny Pickett loves Jordan Addison because he got him drafted in round 1. Shot at Kenny Pickett. One of the things I've always liked about Jordan Addison is despite being a smaller receiver, he scores a lot of touchdowns. He has 17 receiving touchdowns since being drafted last year, and he's missed some time with an ankle injury. I think you're finally starting to see him look healthy again. And when he's healthy, we're going to talk about Sam Darnold in segment 2. This offense is impossible to stop. I think Jordan Addison, who was being drafted outside of the top 30 going into the month of December, I think he's a massive value.
Yeah, and I think that's extremely fair. I mean, you look at the touchdown production, there are 6 players who have scored more than 15 receiving touchdowns dating back to last year. Mike Evans, Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Tyreek Hill, and Jordan Addison and CeeDee Lamb. There's one in that group that is not like the others, and that's Jordan Addison solely for his price tag right now. And I think a big hesitancy in maybe buying into that price tag is that touchdown production has come on much fewer targets than the rest. Mike Evans, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, all those guys have 200 plus targets in that span. Jordan Addison at 176. So like he is scoring touchdowns at a much higher rate than would be expected. And I think that's somewhat a point of hesitancy. If we know touchdowns can be fluky. So like, where do his stats stand alone there? There are a bunch of major outliers. He's averaging 57.8 receiving yards per game in comparison to Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra, Tyreek, who are all at like 80 plus. Like, there are some reasons that, like, yes, his production is incredible, but I do think there are some reasons to kind of be like, it feels a little fluky.
I understand. Again, touchdown. You're right. Touchdowns can be fluky, but one of the things I love about Jordan Addison is that he's been able to produce over the last 2 years. But no matter who's at quarterback, he's played with 5 different quarterbacks, Kate, including Kirk Cousins, Josh Dobbs, Nick Mullins, Jaron Hall, and now Sam Darnold, and yet he continues to produce. And in this offense, when you're playing opposite Justin Jefferson every single week, you're going to have a bunch of one-on-one opportunities. And like we saw yesterday, when he catches a deep pass, it's likely going to be for a touchdown. And I think the more that he gets comfortable in this offense and the healthier he gets after recovering from this high ankle injury, I do think you're just going to see a lot more weeks of 6 for 92 and 2 touchdowns, 5 for 80 and a touchdown. And yeah, is he ever going to be a wide receiver 1 for your fantasy team? No, absolutely not. But I'm not sure there's a big difference between someone like him and Jaden Reed, who is a top 15 fantasy receiver. They're basically getting the same targets every single week. Why not go out and get Jordan Addison, who is a lot cheaper?
Yeah, I think all of these sentiments are fair. What is the consistency like on a week-to-week basis? I don't know, but Jordan Addison, I think because of that touchdown upside, because of his efficiency across the board, can win you any given week. I mean, 2 of the last 3 weeks, he's had 130 plus receiving yards and 1 or more touchdowns. Like, the floor, I don't think is all that safe, but the ceiling is just about as high as you could ever hope for a wide receiver 2, let alone, maybe wide receiver 3, depending on where you drafted him or whether or not you maybe bought low in those times that he was dealing with both of those ankle injuries. Like, there's a lot to like. Yeah.
Let me ask you this. would you be more willing to buy if you knew that Sam Darnold was going to be the long-term quarterback in Minnesota?
I'm going to be honest, Marcus, I don't think it matters. I think
Oh, okay, great.
when you tell me that, this has been his production, he's doing more with less at quarterback than pretty much anybody, right? I care about Kevin O'Connell and whether or not
Yeah,
Kevin
yes.
O'Connell is
Good
the
answer.
head coach in the play caller in that offense. I think you could, pick your poison. Who do you want to be the quarterback? You want to bring back Sam Darnold? Do you want to see what they have in JJ McCarthy? Like, I don't really think it matters. I think what matters is that Kevin O'Connell is calling the plays and that his offensive system is one in which they can score a lot of points and is pretty friendly to the quarterback. And yeah, that's what I care about.
I care about that as well. But let's talk about Sam Darnold, who continues to have an MVP-like season with the Vikings. We'll talk about his dynasty value next. This episode is brought to you by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours. How can you spend it wisely to improve yourself? Why don't you check out our sponsor, Hillsdale College, which is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, and so much more. Plus, all of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, and discussions, or just kick back and enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. If you love watching the game, you're going to love Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy, whether it's football, basketball, or any of your favorite sports. Prize Picks makes your holidays bigger and brighter. Here's why you need to check it out. You can win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks. Plus, this holiday season, they're giving away $30 million in rewards during Pixmas and offering two free picks in December. And when your picks hit, Prize Picks makes it easy to cash out. You can get your money in as fast as 15 minutes. This week, I'm looking for Rico Dowdle to go over 50 rushing yards against the Bengals. I think he's going to have a good night tonight on Monday Night Football. It's quick, it's simple, it's so much fun to challenge myself and my friends. Download the Prize Picks app today and use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's right, $50 instantly when you play just $5. Prize Picks, run your game. Welcome back to the Lockdown Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Okay, let's talk about Sam Darnold, who had a decent day on Sunday. 22, okay. 22 for 28, 347 yards and 5 touchdowns. On the season, Kate, he is at 3,300 passing yards, 28 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Also has added in a couple rushing touchdowns. What are your thoughts long-term with Sam Darnold?
Here's the thing. I think Sam Darnold is outplaying himself here in Minnesota. I don't think that this is going to be a situation where he feels like taking a discount because this is the team that revitalized his career. No, I think, Sam Darnold probably going to be, a interesting name in the free agent market. There are several teams out there without an answer quarterback, and not all of them are going to be in position to draft one of the top assets in this class. Sam Darnold, 200 plus receiving yards in all but 2 games this year. All but 3 of his games, he's had multiple passing touchdowns. Like, there's no mistake about it. This is the best year he's ever had as a passer. And he's finally looking like the draft prospect that the Jets selected. But That being said, I think his play has earned him a bigger contract than what the Minnesota Vikings are going to be able or be willing to hand him. Do I think it makes sense for him to go back to Minnesota? Probably.
Well, that was going to be my question. Like, if you're Sam Darnold, why not try to stick with a franchise that finally has put the right pieces around you and has the right coaching staff? Like, sure, could he chase more money from, I'm just going to name some teams like Tennessee, right? Maybe Tennessee's not in the top 3 to draft a quarterback, but they clearly need one. Could he go and do that? Sure. But if you're Darnold, like, why not just try to stay with a team for the next couple of years and continue to rebuild your value?
I mean, I think that would probably make the most sense when you're thinking long-term longevity of his career. And I think this probably is just going to depend on how much Sam Darnold believes that he is transformed here in the offense, or whether or not he thinks he's been the beneficiary of the offensive scheme. If he thinks he's been the beneficiary of the offensive scheme and it might not translate to another offense, yeah, you're probably going to be more apt to taking a discount. But if he thinks he's found the new Sam Darnold, a la a Baker Mayfield, who was also impervious to, a coordinator switch this offseason, which there were questions about that. Like, I don't know, but I also think, like, if I'm the Minnesota Vikings and I have seen, you know, levels of success with, quarterbacks that you would never fathom could have any level of success at this point in their careers in this offensive system, why wouldn't I just go with JJ McCarthy?
I mean, I understand the logic. I mean, it's true. Like, you can just pay a rookie quarterback. You can continue to keep all these pieces around him. It's just, what do we think Sam Darnold's going to end up with? Like, again, he's at 3,300 yards right now, 28 touchdowns. Like, could he get to 35 touchdowns and 4,200 passing yards? If he gets to those numbers, Kate, like, we're talking about legitimate MVP numbers. Do you just give that away because you think JJ McCarthy, coming off a knee injury, is going to be able to get there? I mean, maybe.
We drafted him to be the franchise guy.
You did.
So it just kind of depends on how much do you think he benefited from this year of, scouting and being able to watch from the bench. And, he didn't get the live reps. How important is that? I mean, it's a guy coming out of college who, unlike an Anthony Richardson, or, pick your poison similarly, like, he had plenty of live reps, right? Like, so this was more about his transition to the pros, not necessarily like, the just the function of getting in and playing actual football games. Like, I like JJ McCarthy. I thought he had a pretty safe floor here coming out of Michigan. I thought he was one of the more pro-ready guys, and, having him come out and, not getting the benefit of the doubt in terms of, like, the injury front and not knowing how he would execute Kevin O'Connell's offense just gives me pause. But I think these are only questions that the Minnesota Vikings can answer. But to your point, if he posts a legitimate MVP season, what does that do to his market, right? Like, you have to imagine that with the current prices, he's probably going to earn upwards of 45 million a year,
Oh, yeah.
at
I mean,
least.
yeah, at least. It's just whether or not he decides to take a hometown, not even hometown, because that's not his hometown, but, like, if he wants to stay in a good situation, right?
The theoretical hometown discount. Yeah.
Right. I guess I look at, if I was Sam Darnold's agent, he'll be 28 this offseason. Like, sign a 2-year deal in Minnesota and, like, hey, play these 2 years. JJ McCarthy would still be on a rookie contract. Show that you're not just a 1-year wonder, and you're going to get even more money in the 2027 offseason when you put together 3 straight good years. You're only 29 years old, 30 years old. Like, I think that's what I would do. We'll see what Sam Darnold does. I love watching him play. I love watching him look
You
like
love
this.
watching him play in Kevin O'Connell's offense, just to be clear.
Right. Correct. The version that we're seeing now is everything I hoped when he came out of USC. I just have some real concerns. Like, if he goes elsewhere, what's that going to look like for not only his real life NFL value, but also his dynasty value, because almost no matter where else he goes, Kate, he's not going to be playing in an offense that is as quarterback friendly.
Yeah. And I mean, let's even look at his current value, right? Like through the season so far, he's had two performances here in the span of the season so far. And well, pending Monday Night Football, I think he will definitely have a third.
Well, Cooper
but
Rush, you're not. Never mind. Go ahead.
I don't know. But like, you looked at the other weeks, right? There have been, because of, maybe a lack of rushing upside, like he still has kind of that, even if he's MVP passer, he's still got like CJ Stroud syndrome where he's going to finish, like
Yeah, but he actually
mid.
throws touchdowns. That's
Yeah, I would say mid, he's a mid-range QB2. And if that's the kind of player that you're getting with this amount of question marks, I still don't think he's worth trading for in Dynasty specifically. But
I
he's
will
a
say
name worth watching.
I play in several leagues where it's 6 points per passing touchdown. And in those leagues, he's just so much more valuable. But in standard 4-point passing touchdown leagues, I get it. Again, 28 touchdowns this year, though. He's going to probably hit 33, 34, 35 touchdowns. I just don't know if we can continue to ignore that, especially if we find out that he signs a deal and he's playing with Jordan Addison and Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson again next year. He's going to be pretty high in my dynasty rankings. Kate, let's talk about some backup running backs who shined in week 14. Well, kind of. We'll talk about one that did and one that did not next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL, all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day. One in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins. Available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. All right, okay, let's talk about backup running backs. Zach Charbonnet looked absolutely phenomenal for the Seahawks in week 14. What do you make of his performance?
It's really hard not to get like way too overexcited for Zach Charbonnet because Marcus, he looked like the running back that I thought the Seattle Seahawks were actually drafting, who maybe is one of these running back who needs like a little bit more volume. Like, Kenneth Walker, you put the ball in his hands, you go, like you zoom, you get the zoomies, you got the explosiveness, you just run and it's a house call. Zach Charbonnet, he's more of like this physical bruising running back than a Kenneth Walker is. And sometimes those are the guys that will benefit most from volume, like a James Conner, for instance. Like when he doesn't get that many carries, like he doesn't get to impose his physicality on opposing defenses, like a Najee Harris, if you will. Like some of these really physical dudes, Derrick Henry, who just kind of heat up as the game goes on. I think this is that's more of Zach Charbonnet's build as a RB prototype. And finally seeing him get volume on a more consistent basis, seeing him integrate more consistently into the offense, and then getting that full workload here. I think that this is closer to the version of Zach Charbonnet that the Seahawks saw when he was drafted.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, he looked phenomenal. 190-ish yards yesterday. He's kind of the inside runner that Seattle needs, but Kenneth Walker is just so much more explosive, right? So you understand why Walker is a starter, But man, if you want somebody that is just a menace between the tackles, can bounce off tacklers, that's Zach Charbonnet. And anytime, Kate, that he started over the last 2 years, he's always produced big numbers. He's been an RB1. I think right now he is the most valuable handcuff in the NFL because it seems like when he is starting, Seattle has no issue just giving him a bunch of touches. 29 touches in this game. I thought he was unbelievable. I wanted to talk about Braylon Allen, though, this felt like a big opportunity for Braylon Allen with Breece Hall out. 11 carries for 43 yards. Isaiah Davis actually got 10 carries for 40 yards and a touchdown. Braylon Allen did catch 4 passes for 38 yards, so 15 total touches. I just didn't think he looked all that great, though.
Didn't look all that great, but I think, I think in general, the offense, I don't think this is a circumstance where I'm looking at the overall picture, the ecosystem, and saying this is going to be a successful place for running backs. And, generally speaking, Breece Hall's kind of this exception because kind of like Kenneth Walker, like he doesn't necessarily need a ton of offensive plays per game. He doesn't necessarily need to touch the ball a million times to get some of these like breakaway plays. I do think we're going to probably, with the season lost officially out of playoff contention, we're probably going to see a little bit more Isaiah Davis, probably going to see more Braylon Allen. And here's the thing. I think both of those guys, really talented running backs. Isaiah Davis was one of my absolute favorite sleepers in this draft class, along with Braylon Allen, which like Isaiah Davis, more the deep sleeper, but like this is just an embarrassment of riches at the running back position in New York. So like,
yeah,
what do they do when you have 3 really talented running backs from an organizational standpoint?
I think they're just going to continue to feed Breece Hall, and Isaiah Davis and Braylon Allen are going to compete.
Away.
Basically, yeah.
How about Sincere McCormick?
Promotion, commotion.
This was the week of the backup running back for real. 15 carries, 78 yards. Didn't have a rushing touchdown, but averaged 5.2 yards per carry. He was an RB2. This is an organization that has a ton of needs. I think what this week kind of just taught me, Marcus, we are in what was probably for most people like one of the most crucial weeks of the entire season. This was a make or break season or week for a lot of players who maybe rostered some top running backs, a Christian McCaffrey, a Breece Hall. This week was just such a staunch reminder of the fact that more often than not, it's the depth at running back and not those top end names. Top scorers for this week: Zach Charbonnet, Isaac Guerendo, Josh Jacobs, Rashad White, Kyron Williams, James Conner, Bijan Robinson, Chuba Hubbard, David Montgomery, Tyrone Tracy Jr. Those are your top 10 scorers heading into Monday Night Football. How many of them were actually being valued as top 5, top 10 running backs in Dynasty ahead of this season, or even now? 2? 2. Bijan and Kyron? Depth at the running back has never been, I think, more important, and this is just a great example of that. I know we have plenty of stars that have shown out this year that were like older and, I get it. But I also think remember this conversation we had just 2 weeks ago about the incoming draft class and the depth at running back.
Yeah.
I think this is just my reminder that stop investing in elite running backs, go with depth, and hope that one of these many dart throws hits, because that always seems to be the case.
I think that's a good strategy here. I do want to point out with Sincere McCormick, he got multiple goal line carries, just wasn't able to convert for a couple of different reasons. He also had a 35-yard screen pass called back because of a personal foul by their center. So the day could have been even bigger, but I think one of the reasons why we liked him is that we thought he could be the most efficient running back in this backfield. No other running back on this team, Kate, had more than 1 carry, and that was Amir Abdullah. He was the only other running back to get a touch. It does seem like over the next month, and Sincere McCormick is somebody that you're going to want to have in your lineup, at least as a flex play. And with this offense now going to Desmond Ridder, I've got to assume he's going to get a bunch of touches. So Sincere McCormick, probably not a league winner because that's too strong, but somebody that could help you if you have injuries at the running back position, whether it's to Breece Hall or whoever. Make sure that he's on your roster for this stretch run in your dynasty leagues. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen of the day. Make sure you check us out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Kate on Twitter at Kate Modjuk. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy Monday Night Football in the Simpsons broadcast if you're into that kind of thing. We'll break it all down here on Tuesday.